All right, it's time to get this ball rolling. We have this to install, AGP fork, and we also have an ACT clutch, just the standard clutch setup with the street disc. So this will be everything that we need right here: flywheel, pressure plate, alignment tool. And we're actually going to use, I think we have the Mopar throwout bearing we're going to be using. So we're going to go over everything that we need to do to get this removed. All right, so we're going to be installing the clutch. I'm going to go over what we need to do to get that done. I'm going to start with removing the battery, unplugging the solenoids, removing all the vacuum lines so none of that stuff gets damaged. You can also do it one of two ways. You can remove the throttle body. There's two 10mm bolts that hold that on, or you can remove the entire intake manifold. It just makes it a little bit easier. I'm doing some other work to this car, so I'm choosing to remove the entire intake manifold, and along with that we'll be removing the cold side charge pipe. And here's something real quick. This is for your reverse lights, so we're going to get that unplugged and tuck it out of the way. I already have the cold air kit that was in here already removed. Here's all your injectors. Slide your locks up if you have them. This will come up out. Had to remove the fuel line here. I disconnected this vacuum tube here. We got our throttle cable is unbolted. Idle air, throttle position. This is loose. This one did actually have the little dog bone mount down there off the starter, which is also a rarity to see. Very gently put a screwdriver on the top, push these down, worked them all off so we didn't damage anything. Here's our vacuum line assembly. Okay. Now it was just easier for me to pop it off here, and then there's a connection here. Okay. Now, all we got to do is gently kind of wiggle this thing back. I'll probably end up having to take this off entirely. Just kind of give it a swirl here. All right, so we got it maneuvered up here. You can see this gasket is quite aged, very dry. All right, so it's hard to say just how long that's been on there. Definitely needed a replacement. Was still sealed good. You know, it wasn't causing any issues there. Look how nice and clean this is down inside. No oil, no nothing, so should be pretty good. Now this one here has a clamp, which is typically there. I normally will run my screwdriver down this way so that I can reach that. So I'll have to remove this clamp. This vacuum line runs back. It feeds vacuum to your booster to help your power assist on your brakes. And then once I get that done, we're going to move on to some other things. I will clean up the surface there on the cylinder head, and I like to run tape across there so that I know nothing falls into there while I'm working on anything, because that's definitely something you do not want to have happen. I have my throttle cable tucked up out of the way. I like to push this stuff up here. Okay, so there's that. Here is our wiring harness. All right. I also got this vacuum line that was down to the lower intake. I got that pushed up out of the way. So the next thing I'm going to undo is I'm going to work on getting the starter, which is this little plug here. You kind of give it a push and they slide off. Okay, so it's a 13 here, and then it's 15 mils that hold the starter in. The only reason why I need to get it off to take off your throttle body is so you can get to this bolt. These other ones you would have to access from the bottom, which would be easy once you have your charge pipe out of the way and that lower bracket if you're doing your trans, if you can see down in there. Okay, so some of that stuff I can reach from up here, so I'm probably going to do it along with this, but I'm going to get the starter out of the way, and then we're going to work on our cables over here. These already have the aftermarket bushings, so I'd like to get underneath here with like a screwdriver or some kind of a small pry bar, and then they'll pop up off. Now your bracket, hopefully you can see where my finger is. There's a bolt there, and then there's a bolt back there. They're both 18 mil. I usually pop these off, and then I use a small ratchet, and I get down in here, and I just break them loose, and I take the bracket and everything, and then I'll lift it up, and I'll like hang it, get the bracket and the cables up here out of my way. So that's one more thing. So I'm going to knock the starter out, those cables. I'm going to undo the clamp down here, get this charge pipe out of the way. Okay, so we got both of those bolts removed. This thing's up. Okay, now we're going to go down to the bottom. But before I did that, I came back here and I loosened this clamp that is on the charge pipe that connects to the turbo. So this oil on this area is just typical because of where the PVC valve goes in. Oil will sit there, it'll condense, run out of the throttle body, and this is the lowest point, so that's usually where it gathers. Some will get in your intercooler, and then some gets pulled back up when air heats up. Just very typical of a turbo car. All right, so we have to undo this clamp. We want to undo these two 13 mils here. We want to undo this clamp, remove this rubber hose right here also. Okay, so you can use a flathead screwdriver in here, or you can use an 8 mil or a 5/16 for these clamps. So this one here is pretty easy. We'll just loosen it up here a little bit. Should be able to just go like this and pry on this with the screwdriver. And then I'll have to add a little bit of assistance. Same with this one, we're going to loosen this. All right, so I'm going to get both of these pipes off, remove these two 13 mil nuts, and then I'll show you what you got to do to pull this out. All right, we got the two bolts removed. We got our charge pipe here removed. So this, you just kind of got to pull down on it a little bit till it comes off up there. All right, and then spin it away, and it'll come down. These things are very weirdly shaped. It's just how it works. What I'll end up doing is I'll clean this thing off on the outside and the inside with bolts removed. These hold the power steering line. That's two 15s there. There's an 18 here. And I was telling you about the bracket from up top. That's right there. There's three 15 mil bolts, and then there's an 18 there and an 18 up top there. So we're going to get those out, which will remove the lower bracket and that triangle bracket. All right, so here's the front bracket, the lower bracket. I moved the side torsion bracket off. I'm at the point where right now I need to rotate the engine around because I'm going to work on getting the modular clutch unbolted. It's just a lot easier to do that now while everything's still connected and spin it. It might seem like it's a little hard to rotate, but just take a 19, put it on your crank, give it a spin. Okay, so normally how I like to do this is I get my wrench on. All right, it does fit. You could probably hold your hand here. I like to give it a tap to get it to come loose. Sometimes it just seems to work out better. I'll just put my pry bar on here, and I'll come in here and give this a tap. Right. So it started to move there. Alright, the reason why I tap it with a hammer is because this will move if you try to pull on it, okay? Not only that, these bolts here should have Loctite on them if they're installed correctly. They're also a softer metal, so they're easy to strip out. There's a little bit of Loctite there on the top. I don't know if that's picking it up in the camera. I'm going to rotate this around and do this 3 more times. Now that we have all 4 of those out, we need to drain our transmission, which is here. That's a 10 mil. So we're going to drain our transmission. Then we got to pull our wheels and pull our axles out on both sides. We'll still have to unplug our speedometer housing sensor that is right up here, which we'll be able to access once we get this axle and stuff out. So that'll be pretty easy. What this does is it's kind of like undoing a torque converter in an automatic transmission because these are a modular clutch. It's a lot different than what we're going to be installing, which is an aftermarket clutch with a flywheel, a pressure plate, and a disc. So each piece is separated and can be purchased and replaced separate. So if you just need a disc next time, you can just throw a disc in, which makes it a whole lot easier than having to buy a whole modular clutch. Not only that, it's a lot better. You can really notice a difference with those clutch setups over these. All right, so we're gonna move to getting our wheels off and getting our axles out. All right, we got all of the bolts out. For the lower part, I have both of these brackets pulled. They're right here. I think I might have mentioned that. I ended up getting into some other stuff, so in case I'm saying stuff twice, don't worry about it. Just getting crazy. So I got the wheels off the front. So you need to remove your CV axles. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this, and we're going to pull that. It's a 32 mil nut for this. These are both 12 mils here if they're the factory bolts on the calipers. I pull these off and I'll zip tie them to my springs. Then I'll take these two here loose, and then I'll pull out on this, and it'll allow this axle to get pushed back through. And then we can pop that. This side here will pop out with a pry bar. Hopefully it's bright enough in here. We'll get up in here on the back side of this with a pry bar. We still will be draining our fluid. Like I said, that's a 10 here. Your slave cylinder, easy to remove. Just pull a quarter turn and it'll pull right out of the transmission just like that. Okay. Easy enough. All right, and that'll hang off to the side, and then we'll be to the point of having to remove the passenger side. All right, so when you come to your passenger side, it's very similar to the same clip. This is just like a safety holder for the factory nut. If you have an aftermarket axle, it'll have like a castle nut. We'll get this off, 32 mil, pour caliber, hang it up, get our axle out. Now, when you look inside here, if you follow this in, there's an intermediate axle. I'm hoping that this is picking it up. There's two 13 millimeter bolts back in there. You can remove your CV axle and your intermediate axle all at one piece. And then there's only a couple bolts left holding the transmission in, and I'll show you that when we get to it. Here's to see what our fork looks like. Oh, that's the back part of the clutch. That's super warm. Good deal, guys. Look at that pretty AGP fork, brand new. Mopar. Went with the Mopar throwout bearing. Yeah, maybe that's the thing. It's made in Brazil, if that's the right part number. It's the box it came in. We got the Mopar throwout bearing. Very pretty ACT street disc clutch is now installed. Getting ready. We cleaned everything up. The seals and all stuff all looked pretty good. Just didn't get crazy. Like I said, cleaned off that back plate, man. I'll tell you what, it looks like it's brand new now. So, we're getting ready. We're going to pull this transmission and get it up into place. And then we got some other cleaning up stuff to do. We're going to work on getting to the timing belts. But that's pretty much going to be it. The hardest part right now is getting this up and getting it lined up. I'll show you a couple things of what I do when we get it up in there to get it lined up. Got to get it past this. We're going to have to pull these cables up right here. All right. And then here is a speedometer housing plug. That one, you got to really be careful because it likes to get tucked inside of there. Maybe we got it up in there. That'll work. That's out of the way. But yes, everything's tight, and getting this lined up right now on the clutch is probably the hardest part of doing the entire clutch install. All right, well, we had this thing out. We also installed AGP extenders, both of them. So it did, not that it needed it, but they're in there now. We used the correct anaerobic sealer for that. The transmission went in very easily this time. Typically I've had this zip tie on here, so it's usually pretty close. So when I pick it up, I just try to straighten my chain out when I come from this point and off of that point back there. And typically when you lift this thing up, it will go right into place. We also, like I said, I have a strap holding this because both of the mounts were shot. And if you don't have that, it'll sag down out. Also, the lower mount is removed, and we did have a jack underneath of it. So this worked out absolutely perfectly this time. Normally when they go in this easy, there's usually going to be an issue, but I believe we just finally mastered this. Now, we got to finish putting a couple bolts here in the bottom of this, and this transmission will be completely installed. And that's pretty much going to finish everything up. You know, the axle install's going to be the reversal of what it was. I'm probably going to pop that one apart down there so it's easier just to put the intermediate in. As of right now, we're just going to throw a couple bolts in this. I will hit up on some other things in another video also, but this pretty much will finish up the clutch installation for this car. Like I said, install is basically just a reversal of everything that we did. If you have any questions, put that stuff down there in the comments. Like it, and stay tuned for the next video on this build.